But my own focus has been on Drucker and the individual as opposed to Drucker and the organization. And he really did write quite a bit about self-management. I traced it back going to at least 1952 over a long period of time, from let's say 1952, which would have been about 13 years after his first book came out. Wrote about this for a long period of time in different sorts of ways, in articles, in books. What was considered to be the Bible of his books, a very large book called Management, Tasks, Responsibilities, and Practices, came out in 1973. When that book was, when a new version of that book came out, kind of a redone version, still very large, 568 pages, but not quite as large. But when it was done by Drucker, it came out after Drucker's death. But the new version was done by Drucker and a man named Joseph Maciarello, who was a professor at the Drucker School and somebody who had worked with Drucker for a long time and was a very good friend of his, of Peter's. And when they did this new version, they put in a whole section called New Demands on the Individual. So something that wasn't in the original book in 1973 became a major part of the book, became the last, I forget how many pages, but again, the whole last section of the book. So it shows you the importance that he put on the individual and the importance of the individual, and that for organizations to be well run, and he had this idea of a functioning society, which was the name of one of his books. So for a functioning society, organizations need to be well run, organizations of all types, not just businesses. However, he also realized that all this starts at the level of the individual. It's individuals who come together in teams. It's individuals who develop themselves and develop develop other people. So he just felt that self-management was very, very important. So the slide that you're seeing here now is taken from Management Challenges for the 21st Century, a wonderful book that came out in 1999 that I reviewed for USA Today. And there's 5 sort of basic bedrock principles about this idea of self-management for you to really think about and think about how you're going to act on these principles. So the first is really knowing yourself. It's self-knowledge regarding your values, your strengths, and your work habits. Now, intentionally here, we have strengths and not weaknesses. The reason for that is Drucker was all for people improving themselves and realizing if there's things they're not good at to maybe try to become somewhat better. But he also really urged us not to get too hung up on the idea of weaknesses. He felt this happened a lot in schooling, and that it was kind of destructive for students, and it's something that could, for many years, that could be destructive for them, that people would get so hung up on their weaknesses and correcting their weaknesses and getting really upset over their weaknesses that they wouldn't put as much thought and effort into their strengths. So he's saying, really figure out what it is that you're good at, play to your strengths, and yes, if there's certain things that are weaknesses, see what you can do about them, especially some of these things maybe don't need a whole lot of effort, but maybe sometimes in weaknesses what you need to do, if you can do it, is delegate it, or maybe it's just something that doesn't need to be done at all. But again, it's up to you to determine these things, and you're going to have to create some time to really to think about it and do whatever else you need to do to discover what these things really are. And your values, very, very important, because you don't want to have a mismatch of hopefully you do have a strong set of values. You don't want a mismatch of those values when you are, when you're, let's say, in the workplace, but really anywhere else. So again, all these things are very, very important. And of course, your work habits, knowing how you work best, and tailoring your work to that as much as you can. The second point is finding where you belong in an organization and which organization is right for you. So once you figure out the type of, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, your own organization, are you cut out, let's say, to be an entrepreneur? Not everyone is. Is it a big business, a small business? There's a lot of things that really need to be taken into consideration. So what type of organization is right for you? Which particular one, if you could narrow it down in that way? And then finding out where you belong in an organization. Now, sometimes this could be, he said that sometimes it's just continual promotions are just not possible, that you may have to find a level within an organization that's right for you and stay at that level, and that there was nothing necessarily wrong about that. So very important point about where you belong in an organization. Third is deciding on what you will contribute to your work and to the world. He had a great line to, I'm sure a number of our listeners today know about Jim Collins, who wrote classic business books. Good to Great is the best known one from 2001. Jim Collins is a very big Drucker person, and he gave the keynote address for the Drucker Centennial. Drucker would have been 100 in 2009, and I was privileged to be there in Claremont, California, in last November. And Jim Collins gave the keynote, and Jim also wrote the foreword to the Drucker books, the one that I just mentioned, the Management Revised Edition that came out after his death, and also a wonderful compendium called the Daily Drucker, which came out in 2004, a year before Peter died. And there's just wonderful essays in both of those books. But one of the things that he relates, which I think is so wonderful, is that Drucker, he met Drucker earlier in his career, so in a way Drucker became kind of a mentor to him. And one of the things Drucker said is basically go out and make yourself useful. So again, Drucker really had a way of sort of cutting to the chase. He did that with Jim Collins, and it was just tremendously effective of Peter's impact on Jim. So what are you going to contribute to the individual work you're doing and to the world? I was told by one of Drucker's students that sometimes when you're making your decisions on what you want to do in a particular question, that you would broaden it not beyond, well, what's good for you, what's good for the organization, what's good for your family, but that you would broaden it to what's good for humankind, which is really a pretty amazing way to think about it. The fourth idea in these basic concepts for self-management is taking responsibility for relationships. This is obviously all sorts of things. It's your personal relationships, but also your relationships with your people, with the people at work. If you're a manager, for people who report to you, for people up in the organization, sideways in the organization. So really think about what those relationships are, maybe team members that you have, and taking responsibility for your part in those relationships. The fifth point is the idea of planning for the second half of your life. And Drucker said that really most people were not prepared for this. He felt it was really a revolution in human affairs that we had to even plan for this, because remember, life expectancies are so much higher than they were, let's say, when he was born in 1909. Now he himself lived a very, very long life. He lived to be almost 96 years old when he died in 2005. And many people are living to a ripe old age. So it's what are you going to do in the second half of your life, and ideally that you prepare for it before it happens. And it's kind of up to you to decide what a second half is. Is it let's say 40? Is it 50? Whatever it is. But saying what are you going to do to and this can be in all sorts of ways, but especially in how you're going to spend your time, and will it involve some sort of work? And what will that work be? So these are things for you to really think about in this idea of how am I going to have a really meaningful and a productive second half of life.